Hello and welcome into the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Yates, and joining me from beautiful Austin, Texas is senior writer Mike Craven. And Craven, we got two Texas teams in conference championship games this week. Not the bevy of Texas talent in conference championship games we could have had, but still, nonetheless, what a year for Texas teams.
Yeah, big year for Texas teams. Could have been even bigger. Texas A&M lost their chance of the SEC championship and they lost to Texas. SMU lost their chance of the ACC championship in a college football playoff spot with their loss at Cal. But we do have North Texas against Tulane on Friday night, and then Texas Tech versus BYU Saturday morning. I think Tech is in no matter what. North Texas is in with a win, so still an exciting weekend coming up, and we'll have at least two teams in the playoffs, possibly three. We'll talk about Texas's chances here in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Mean Green to start off with. While the conference championship games are going on, it's also big-time coaching carousel because the college football calendar is messed up. Let's talk about North Texas's search for a new head coach. Craven, you reported yesterday on TexasFootball.com that a favorite has emerged.
Yeah, from everyone I know, it was the talk in the press box on Friday night, with us kind of in-state Texas guys on who was going to take the North Texas job. It feels like reporters closer to North Texas than us that are there every day feel this way. Coaches inside the building, some coaches across the state who keep up with this. Neal Brown seems to be the favorite. Now, a lot of this was building over the weekend and maybe jobs opening up at Memphis and Tulane and USF. Alter what's going on here, but from most everyone I talk to, the leading candidate in the clubhouse right now is Neal Brown, and it sounds like it's his job to have if he wants it.
So Neal Brown right now is the special assistant to the head coach at Texas. They got him in the Dwight Schrute role, but he most recently led West Virginia to a bowl game in 4 of the last 5 seasons, and then Troy was just a G5 god with them. 2016 to 2018, he had 3 double-digit win seasons. What would you make of the hire, Craven, if he ends up being the hire? And we'll talk about other candidates too, but if Brown is the front runner, what do you make of this hire?
I think it's a good hire, and it makes a lot of sense. For what I know, Jared Mosley and the decision makers at North Texas wanted a head coach with an offensive background that's been a coach with an offensive background that's been a head coach before. We talk about right. We talk about we've joked about the show how a lot of coaching searches are 180s from the previous regime, kind of the girlfriend rule, but not when it worked out. Right, like had Eric Morris not worked out, North Texas is probably looking for a defensive coach who's older and been around, but since it ended so well, why wouldn't you go after a similar profile? So I think they want somebody who can score a bunch of points, who can call plays, who's an exciting offensive-minded guy with those chops, and they want somebody who's been a head coach before. And Neal Brown checks that. He has been successful at Troy, won 9 games 2 years ago at West Virginia as the Mountaineers kind of moved up to the Big 12. I don't know. That's kind of a weird job, but he was around 500 there. And he's been at Texas Tech, and he's an air raid guy. He played for Hal Mumme and Mike Leach at Kentucky for a couple of years, like the original air raid kind of stop, right? Where it kind of exploded onto the map. So I think it would be a good hire, maybe not one that's like sexy up and coming type name. But winning the press conference and winning the headlines is not as important as winning football games. And the last time he coached in the G5, he won a hell of a lot of football games. So I don't think it'd be a bad hire at all. And it fits with the profile they were going for.
Well, it wouldn't be sexy headline, but it's kind of like the girlfriend when she takes off the glasses. And Neal Brown, he's not the sexy name at first. Then he takes off those glasses. It's like, oh, he was with Mike Leach and Hal Mumme in Kentucky. So he was actually part of the original air raid.
You got to look at it like transfers, right? Like Chandler Morris was in over his head at Oklahoma and TCU, flourished at North Texas, is now, leading Virginia to an ACC championship. Like sometimes you got to find your level. Honestly, I think some of it's the West Virginia job. You're on an island in the Big 12. The Big 12 has changed around you. Recruiting and how you do it is different than it was back then. Who knows the NIL situation with the Mountaineers. So I think it's a good hire. Just from listening to the fan base, I think a lot of people wanted Mac Leftwich, the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech, or Skylar Cassidy, the current defensive coordinator stay afloat. I think a lot of times kind of young and upcoming names are what fan bases wanted. But I think what eliminated those guys from what I know is just the lack of head coaching experience. It does seem like if you look around at this head coaching carousel right now, there are not any coordinators that are getting hired. Like people are scared to death to hire the coordinator. And so instead of the Will Steins of the world, it's been, head coaches from G5. We've seen 4 of the American coaches, like 4 of the top, I think it's 6 of the top 8 G5 teams right now. Their head coaches agreed to be a Power 4 coach.
The American Conference Championship game is Eric Morris, who's the Oklahoma State head coach, and the new Florida coach, John Summerall, in it.
Yeah, and Bob Chesney, who's the James Madison head coach, who's the other G5 team in the mix for the CFP spot, just took the UCLA job. So they've been taking the players in the portal for years, and I think head coaching now is kind of, it's a breeding ground. It kind of did seem like the coordinators were the hot commodity, and maybe G5 coaches didn't have the same swag as they used to, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Why are coordinators losing their swagger?
I think athletic directors realize how important hiring a head coach is and how much it impacts their job, and they'd rather bet on a horse that's been in the race before. There is an art to being a head coach, and if you've never done it, there is a bigger variance of success than if you've done it before. Now, nothing means that, Aaron Morris may not go be successful at Oklahoma State, or John Summerall may not be successful at Florida, but you feel like you've seen them do it at a couple of stops. And that, I think, as an athlete, they want the safe bet is what I think it's why in the NFL, you just see it you just see coaches get passed around, like you're less likely to get fired hiring the guy who wins at the G5 level and has won before the head coach and he fails than you are if you hire a coordinator who's never done it before and he flames out. Like all of a sudden the arrow starts pointing at you in that situation instead of, well, just the head coach wasn't a good hire or whatever.
So let's say Neal Brown falls through. Either he decides to take another job or North Texas is like, actually, we want to go with someone else. Are there any other names floating around here that you could see as dark horse candidates?
Not too much, honestly. A lot of the guys, Tyson Helton at Western Kentucky was a name, but it doesn't sound like he's built a lot of buzz behind the scenes that he maybe hasn't even interviewed at North Texas. I do know that the AD at North Texas, Jared Mosley, reached out to FAU to gauge interest on Zach Kitley, but then FAU kind of gave him an extension, matched whatever the offer would have been, and kept him in-house, and he wants to stay at FAU, so that one seems kind of dead in the water. I do think it would be a similar profile. Billy Napier maybe is a big name that people have heard, but again, like maybe South Florida or Memphis, Tulane goes that route. I think like what happened to Arkansas and Auburn when LSU and Florida opened might happen to North Texas if the Neal Brown thing doesn't go through. Like if the favorite doesn't land and there's not a name that's already kind of number 2 that's just kind of lurking behind the scenes that we don't know yet, I do wonder if they miss on Neal Brown, whether he takes another G5 job or he wants to be a P4 offensive coordinator. I do wonder if then North Texas has to wait in line. They were at the front of the line because they had more time than these other jobs, because Morris took the job earlier and announced it. And there was understandings behind the scenes of what was going on.
Oh, he made a decision in a prompt manner? That I didn't know you were allowed to do that. I thought you had to drag it out for 2 weeks.
And I think he was pretty honest behind the scenes of like what his intentions were. Right. And so they knew for a couple of weeks that they were probably going to have to hire a new head coach, and you just need to start vetting some candidates and go. Neal Brown doesn't have a real job right now. As you mentioned, he's kind of Dwight Schrute at Texas, so he can have those talks. So North Texas was at the front of the line. And then all of a sudden, arguably 3 better jobs within your conference open up in like a 6-hour span on Sunday. And so, if the Neal Brown thing goes through, now is it dependent on who USF hires and who Memphis hires and who Tulane hires, and maybe you're all swimming in the same pools for those candidates, and maybe that opens it up to an FCS coach, like a Clint Killow, or a coordinator that we talked about that maybe wasn't getting as much attention. Maybe it kind of starts from scratch there.
Off the top of my head, I'm a little out of my depth here, but I feel like Memphis is a clear-cut better job than North Texas because of that FedEx money they have. I know you are not a huge fan of Ryan Silverfield, kind of did less with more resources there for quite a while. But where do you think North Texas is on that pecking order with like a USF? Because I really don't know much about USF's resources behind the scenes. Although you have mentioned you went and saw them play North Texas live, and their defensive line was stacked.
Yeah, and I believe that they're going to be the first G5 program to commit to a full rev share from what I've read and heard behind the scenes. So I think the Tulane job is an excellent job because of your location within New Orleans and the talent around you, and it's private school with money. USF has a big budget, a big university, a big campus, a lot of alumni. Memphis with the FedEx money that you mentioned. So I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say North Texas is fourth in that pecking order. But again, like was proven this year, like that doesn't mean North Texas can't compete with those teams, can't win. And maybe buoyed by such a big year here, it gets more fans in the stands, it gets more alumni involved, it gets the alumni that are already donating to donate more money, and they bridge that gap because they are also in the DFW and Texas, and they got wind turbines like right outside their indoor, right? So they got some money and didn't. And maybe this kind of season allows you to tap into that more than you ever could, because it does sound like they were going to give Eric Morris a lot of money to stay. So there's money in the banana stand, and maybe a big season like this gets it out, but it's hard to argue it's a better job on paper than those other three.
Well, North Texas is a win away from potentially getting in the college football playoff. Another Texas team who can't prove it anymore on the field, got to let their resume stand, is the Texas Longhorns. And they just beat Texas A&M, which is their third top 10 win of the season. That matches 2019 LSU, one of the greatest college football teams of all time. But they have a really bad loss against Florida, who's 4-8, had to fire their coach. They had a bad win against Kentucky, 13-10 in overtime. They had to fire their coach, and needed a miracle comeback over 5-7 Mississippi State to even have an opportunity to be 9-3, not be completely eliminated. So Sark, on the field, moments after beating A&M, said it'd be a disservice to the sport if Texas was left out of the playoff. What say you, Craven?
Well, there's going to be a disservice then, because they're getting because it's just a math problem for the Longhorns. It is a 12-team playoff. 5 teams are guaranteed a spot. So if we just run down this, like, okay, there's going to be 5 teams from the SEC already in. That's Georgia, Ole Miss, OU, A&M, Alabama. From the Big Ten, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon. So we got 8 right there. Add the G5 champion, add the ACC champion, add the Big 12 champion, we are at 11. That means there is 1 spot left for Notre Dame, Miami, possibly BYU, Texas, Vanderbilt. They're not getting in. The committee has told you what they think of Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, which doesn't play in a conference championship game, they are locked in as well. Which team are you removing from that mix? Some would argue that it should be the G5 representative, or that it should be the ACC champion, or that it should even be the Big 12 champion in years that they don't have a team like Texas Tech this year. I would say those people hate college football, and they should just go watch the NFL. But as it's situated now, in a 12-team race, and this is, by the way, this is what's going to make it. This is going to become 16 next year, right? Because they're going to point. Sure. They're going to point to this. They're going to point to the victim old Texas, like who got bullied and picked on and left out despite all their wins. They're going to use this as the reason to do it.
And to take the G6 team out too, by the way. They're gone here pretty soon.
That's probably not wrong. They're going to make it, actually what they're going to do is make it a clarifier where you have to be in the top 15 or the top 20, and then they'll always put them in like 22.
Yeah. Who determines that if they're in the top 15?
Right. Yeah. Our hands are tied. They're not in the top 20. Like, who knows? So yeah, I don't think that there's any space for Texas. Do I agree with the case in which that is being made for Texas? Somewhat. I mean, they do probably have the best 3 collection of wins in the country. And do I think that they're better than Virginia or North Texas or James Madison? Probably. But there's a lot of times in the Major League Baseball playoff that there's a team left out that's more talented than like the Brewers, right? Or, there's a team in the AL East that's more talented than the team that made it in the AL Central, but like the breaks, like this is not about finding the best, most talented teams. We know that in August or September. Bud Elliott's come up with the blue chip ratio a decade ago. Like we know who has the most talent, but who's deserved their way in. If 5 SEC teams get in and we're upset that the sixth one who lost by 25 to Georgia less than a month ago doesn't get in, it's to me, boy who cried wolf. And while I get the case Sark is making and why he's making it, last year would have been more of a chance.
For sure.
This year, the club's too crowded and you're just not allowed in.
I know some people were jumping on Sark for that quote, but I also say, what is he supposed to say when the first 2 questions from ESPN, Molly McGrath, are about the college football playoff? Like, watching that Texas game, I would have loved if we could have talked about Texas beating their arch rival at home for the first time since 2010 and ending their perfect season for 0.2 seconds before it immediately went to, like, what does this say to the committee in the college football playoff?
It's my least favorite thing about the playoff culture we've created. And it's the number one reason in which I've always pushed back at the 4 team, at the 12 team. It has made it to where it's the only thing that matters in the sport. And we have closed off access to like 80 of the 136 teams anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's conflicts of interest everywhere. ESPN is the one that makes the money off the college football playoff. So why wouldn't they make it the pinnacle of the sport? And they drive so much of the conversation. We could get into the Nick Saban and the Lane Kiffin, and there's just, the Jimmy Sexton of it all. Like there's just so many conflicts of interest between the 4-letter network and the NCAA and the coaches and who's in and who's not and who gets to be in the bully pulpit, who doesn't, and who gets propagandized and who doesn't. Like it's all, you can all trace it back to like what benefits the TV networks, and by extension, the conference members in which they employ. And I'm with you. I wish the football mattered. And just the way that we talk about the sport, like the results, Miami's going to get left out over Notre Dame, even though they beat Notre Dame and they have the exact same record. A couple weeks ago, Oklahoma beat Alabama on the road, and people were talking about how Alabama's rating got raised and Oklahoma's lowered because of turnovers and the probability. It doesn't matter what happens in 10 other timelines. It doesn't matter that like Texas in theory is better than these other teams or whatever. Like we don't go back to 1976 and be like, oh, well, this team's the national champion, but number 4, like their power rating was incredible. If not for 2 turnovers, they would have won the national championship. Nobody gives a shit. It's like who won the title, who didn't. And we've just gotten away from that. And some of it is the conferences are so bloated and so top heavy that like the point of the conferences originally was to like claim a regional champion that could then go play against other regional champions. And then we would know who the best teams are. But now we've made it to where like all the best teams are in the quote unquote, all the best teams are in the SEC, all the best teams are in the Big Ten. And then we go, well, these other teams can't compete. There's no way that they could compete against these teams. And you don't have to prove it. You don't have to prove your math. Like it's all a theoretical conversation, even though the Florida team that beat Texas, that's going to knock the Longhorns out of the playoff, lost to USF like a couple weeks earlier than that. And USF can't even play for the American Conference Championship. So I just think we've lost the plot. I've probably talked about that too much on this podcast, and I just think every week we're reminded of it.
Yeah, and I go back to what you said. We know who's the most talented team in August. So if we want to just go on who's the most talented team, you don't even have to play the games. And I feel like that is what some people who cover the sport, like honestly, they don't care as much about the games. They care more about the power ratings. And I think the beauty of sport is, yes, sometimes you succeed, but also the beauty of sport is sometimes you fail, and sometimes you are the favorite, and sometimes David beats Goliath, and that's why we tune in. And I think that's being removed as you just give these teams that have the most resources more and more chances to prove that they're better than everyone when they have 100x the resources.
And those podcasters and writers don't want to cover the whole sport. They care about clicks and they care about ratings. And getting Texas into the playoff, or at least making the case for Texas into the playoff, like that's a team that they cover. They know the helmet. They know they have an audience for those. Like they don't want to start breaking down Tulane versus James Madison. Like that wouldn't be good for their brand. Every time they start talking about that kind of stuff, they get outed as idiots, right? Like they know about 25 teams and they would like to keep it at that because then they sound smart and their viewership is the same as it always is. The more of these smaller schools get in there, you know, them talking about Tulane versus North Texas won't get the same clicks. It won't get the same ratings. They won't have as much of an expertise about it. And like, it's all about that. Like it all plays into it.
Which we do as well, too. I mean, let's admit our bias. We're a Texas program, state of Texas program. And I know when I push these podcasts out here, sometimes I lean more to putting an A&M or Texas Tech thumbnail on it than a Texas one because those get more views and we have more of a fan base there. So it's not like even I totally blame these medium. I blame them a little bit for just being like, I only cover 25 teams, but I can also understand their argument that they would make behind closed doors, which is what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in this for a bit. Like, this isn't like UNICEF or something, you know, like we're all trying to make money and pay bills. Like I have a daughter, like I got to make money or whatever, but like, it shouldn't be at the expense of the sport. Like cover the sport that you're covering. And if you just want to cover 32 teams, then there's a league for that.
I want to throw two chaos scenarios for the college football playoff at you. What if Duke, a 5-loss team, wins the ACC championship? Do we somehow get the AC champion and the Sun Belt champion in?
I'll believe it when I see it. I am a cynic. I just spent the last 20 minutes telling you that brands and logos matter to these people more than the results on the field. And while I would argue James Madison should be in over Duke, I believe that they would use the win over a top 20 Virginia to go see. That's a better win than anybody James Madison's beat. James Madison lost to Louisville. So I don't see them leaving out the ACC.
And this one is just a cruel concoction I have in my head right now. What if the committee takes out Ole Miss because their offense was the best part of their team, and now the offensive staff is gone with Lane Kiffin?
Yeah, if Ole Miss played in the ACC or the Big 12 or the G5, I would totally believe that would happen. It will not happen with an SEC team.
Okay, so that SEC saves them.
I think the big kind of chaos scenario that is the most likely to be, and this can kind of lead into our next conversation, I think the one that really throws up in the air is BYU beating Tech.
Yeah.
Because then BYU gets the automatic Big 12 bid, and now Tech jumps into that group with Notre Dame, Miami, Texas, Vanderbilt. Like now, does Tech get left out over Notre Dame? Does Tech get left out over Miami? Now that becomes the real chaos scenario, not for just us, but just nationally, I think.
All right, let's talk about it then. Number 5, Texas Tech versus number 11, BYU in the Big 12 championship, 11 a.m. at Jerry World on ABC. Yeah, is Tech a lock no matter what? Because I have kind of pictured if they get to the Big 12 championship, they're in because they're so dominant. I mean, Texas Tech's the number 3 ranked scoring defense in the FBS at 11.25 points per game, which is the second best in the Big 12 history behind 2009 Nebraska, led by Ndamukong Suh. That was an amazing team. And look, this is a revenge game for Texas Tech because other than the one loss they had, Texas Tech beating BYU by 22 points was the closest Big 12 game they played this year.
Yeah, so I think to make this simpler, we're assuming Notre Dame. So I went over those 12 spots, right?
Notre Dame's in. The committee loves Notre Dame.
Okay, so I think Notre Dame is 12th in this scenario, right? I think Georgia, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, A&M, and Bama, who is playing for the SEC championship, I think those 5 teams are in. I think Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon are in. And then the G5 champion, the Big 12 champion, and the ACC champion are in. That's 11 spots, and then Notre Dame is in that fight for that last at-large bid. And I think Notre Dame would get that over Miami and Texas and BYU if they pick up their second loss in the Big 12 championship. So to me, to make this, I think, simpler in my head, because I'm not smart enough to have all these variables, it becomes a Notre Dame versus Texas Tech conversation. Maybe if Bama gets blown out by Georgia in the SEC championship, maybe Bama is in there and they can figure out Notre Dame and Tech over Bama. Maybe. But if it's Notre Dame versus Texas Tech for the final at-large spot, I don't know how you pick the Fighting Irish. I don't know.
I know how the committee does, but I agree with you. I don't think they should. Bias aside, we're Texas Tech-centric podcast over Notre Dame because of our brand, but I think Texas Tech is better.
They would have a win over BYU that would beat them, right? So they split the matchup with the team that they lost to. Their only loss was with a backup quarterback on the road against Sam Leavitt was still playing.
The reigning Big 12 champion.
Sam Leavitt's kind of last stand there. Yeah. And then they beat Utah, which the committee loves for whatever reason. Beyond me, the committee absolutely loves Utah. And so they would have a win over Utah. They would have a win over BYU. All their other wins would be by 20 plus points. And their only loss is with a backup quarterback. Here are the teams that Notre Dame has beaten. Purdue, Arkansas, Boise State, NC State, USC, Boston College, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford. I'll buy the USC being a good win, but that's not Utah. That's not BYU. Same with Pitt, who admitted before the game they didn't even care about the game. So I don't know, man. I don't know how Tech would go from probably 4th or 5th this week to out by losing in a rematch to a game on a neutral site. But like we spent the first 20 minutes talking about, maybe Notre Dame's brand is big enough to do it.
And I think BYU is pretty cut and dry. I don't think they have a case if they lose. Maybe they should, but right. I don't know if they do.
Yes, they should, but they don't. Because we could do the same thing with BYU. BYU's got better wins than Notre Dame does.
And they would have run the table except for Texas Tech, who could be the number 3 seed. So it's like your only 2 losses were to the same team. That's the number 3 seed.
And they beat BYU. I mean, they beat Utah, which again the committee loves. They beat Cincinnati, who their end to the season probably hurts BYU's case here a little bit. BYU beat a lot of the top teams in the Big 12 that were ranked at the time. So I think in a blind resume test, I think BYU would have a real chance. But we don't do blind resume tests. We do helmets, and the helmets of BYU in the conference that they play in will keep them out. I agree with you. I think 11-2 BYU. While I don't agree with it, will be left out.
That Notre Dame Golden Dome is so shiny, even when you close your eyes to go blind, you still see the gold through your eyelids. Like when you stare at the sun. I know that one's Notre Dame.
I think what needs to happen for the Big 12 to get 2, and I'm not sure they would even in this scenario, but the only way in which they could get 2 is if Georgia beats Bama by like 20. And then Bama with 3 losses, 1 being to Florida State. Then maybe they get left out, and 11-2 BYU or 11-2 Tech is able to sneak in along with Notre Dame.
I do realize that we talked about the college football playoff ruining, like the playofffication kind of ruining the sports where we don't talk about that games, and we just didn't really talk about this this Big 12 championship because I think it's pretty cut and dry. Like if Texas Tech takes care of business, they win.
Yeah, I was there in Jones Stadium for the first matchup between these two, and Texas Tech was up 26-0, if memory serves me right, with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and it could have been 42-0 if they did better in the red zone. Like BYU, it's just like Utah. It's a bad matchup for those schools that are built on physicality and the lines of scrimmage, because in the Big 12, for the most part, that wins. You can bully Baylor. You can bully a lot of like Oklahoma State. You can bully a lot of these kind of, Big 12 rosters that don't have kind of the monsters along the offensive line and defensive line. Tech has those. Like you're not going to bully Lee Hunter. You're not going to bully David Bailey. You're not going to bully Anthony Hall. Like they can play your game better than you can, right? They're just as physical as you, and then they're more talented. And so to me, that's why Arizona, like a team like Arizona State was the tougher matchup for Tech because they could spread you out. They got big play wide receivers. They can kind of bypass that stuff. BYU's got a young quarterback. They run the ball with LJ Martin. They're not necessarily elite on the edges. And so if it becomes a phone booth game against Texas Tech, the only teams that can beat them doing that are like Georgia and Ohio State and like those type of teams. BYU is not one of those teams. And so if Tech doesn't turn the ball over, and if BYU doesn't figure out a way to get explosive plays either through special teams or busted coverages and stuff like that, I think Tech rolls. And I'm kind of over the idea of Tech is going to stub their toe.
Not the Big 12 championship game.
I tweeted this. I tweeted this on Saturday. Tech just shows up and beats your ass.
Yeah,
like that. They don't play these kind of it's 17-14 in the fourth quarter, and they just beat the crap out of you if they're better than you. And I think that's what we're going to see on Saturday.
If they were going to go into Morgantown, West Virginia, and have zero letdown, just beat your ass, they're not going to have any letdown in the Big 12 championship game. Like, the moment's not too big. You worry about the moment not being big enough for them to get up. The moment's not too big for them.
Yeah, and it's probably for a quarterfinal. With that A&M loss, I think Tech could get the 4 seed, and then that would probably be at the Cotton Bowl, which would be cool. That would be, huge for the Red Raiders. So I think this is a bad matchup for BYU. I think it's a great matchup for Texas Tech. The things you got to worry about are always the upset special stuff that you got to worry about. You want to execute better in the red zone because field goals can get you hurt. You want to avoid special teams, big plays and turnovers because that gets the Cougars in this game in a way that they normally wouldn't be. And then you just have to worry about, injuries, and specifically to Behren Morton, with his injury history, that's always on the table without having your backup quarterback as well. If you're down to your third quarterback in the second quarter, maybe this thing gets weird. But other than that, I don't know how many routes to success BYU has that doesn't include Texas Tech's own implosion.
All right, let's go to our next conference championship game with the Texas team. It's the AC Championship. Number 20 North Texas versus number 24 Tulane. Friday night, 7 p.m. I'm so excited for this game. And also, we mentioned this, but it's Oklahoma State head coach Eric Morris and Florida head coach John Summerall in this game. Why could Ole Miss not have just let Lane do this like these guys, huh? I mean, poor Lane. Why can't he just finish the run like these guys can?
I don't want to derail this thing on Lane Kiffin talk. I could go for 20 minutes on the Lane Kiffin.
I keep steering this off the mountain.
There are very few times that I wish I was national. I'm a Texan. I enjoy Texas. I grew up watching all of these teams in the Southwest Conference and stuff. So for me, I have my dream job, right? There are occasions in which there are stories that I love to talk about that I just don't get an opportunity to because we don't cover anything that's adjacent to it. The Lane Kiffin thing has been one of those. But moving on to this game in the American in New Orleans, my first thought is North Texas should be hosting. In every metric, including the one that in my opinion matters most in terms of who are best teams, like who are the most qualified teams, is Vegas. And North Texas is a road favorite right now. Like they are the better football team. Their only loss was to South Florida at home, and South Florida was rolling. The common opponent that Tulane lost to was UTSA, and North Texas, raced over them. Tulane didn't have to play South Florida, so they don't share that loss. So I think North Texas should be the home team. That's my first thought. Second thought is Tulane isn't a great pass defense.
I had that in my notes too. They are 11th in the AC in pass defense.
If there's like a wound on you that Eric Morris could poke, it is pass defense, right? Like if you are not good at that, I don't know how much of a chance that you have unless you can just overwhelm North Texas at the line of scrimmage. And I don't know if the Green Wave have the type of players South Florida did, because that's what South Florida did. Like North Texas just couldn't block him long enough to be consistent in the pass game. Mestemaker's under a bunch of pressure. He starts throwing interceptions, and that one gets away from him. I don't think Tulane has those guys. I don't think it'll be clean living for Mestemaker. He will be under pressure sometimes, but I believe the North Texas offense is able to score on Tulane in this pass defense. So to me, this game comes down to Tulane's offense versus North Texas's defense. And if the changes and the improvements and the turnovers forced come up here, because I think the only way North Texas loses this game is in a shootout in which the defense just can't get any stops either.
It's almost like Tulane is walking to a match with Mike Tyson. It's like, I am all good, except I kind of have a weak jaw right now a little bit. It's kind of like creaking and stuff like that. It's like, Mike Tyson's going to find it. That's not the weakness you want going into this game.
That's 100% right. Like this is like, that doesn't need to be your kryptonite. And to me, that's the biggest mismatch of this game. Like you can't find any big flaws. Like North Texas isn't the greatest run defense in the world in terms of like success rate, but Tulane's not the greatest run offense in the world either. So they're not going to be able to exploit that in the same way that North Texas is going to be able to exploit Tulane's deficiency defensively. And then if you can steal a possession or two, and that's what the Skylar Cassidy team has been good at, is stealing, on average about 2 possessions a game, that flips the math. And if North Texas can avoid those turnovers, because the game that I like to look at the losses to identify the flaws, right? Like, that's how they can lose a ball game. And for North Texas, it was very clear, right? Like you have to be better along the lines of scrimmage in order to force some mistakes and to eliminate that advantage North Texas gets from the extra possessions. If you can win the turnover battle, you got a chance. If you can get pressure, you got a chance. Tulane's defense, I don't see them as like that big of a turnover forcing unit. They've been very up and down this year. Like when they played well, they've played well. But they haven't been kind of the typical Summerall dominant defense. So I don't know, man. Like this could be my Texas brain, but I just think this is a solid matchup for North Texas, and there's a reason that they're a favorite on the road.
Yeah, I mean, when you go down the numbers on Tulane, they're kind of mid-pack in a lot of the American metrics, but I think that's also a credit to John Summerall, why he's getting a new job, is like how good of a coach he is. But I agree. Like, I think North Texas has the matchup. I think they've had the better season. I think I'm picking North Texas here too with you. You've convinced me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Tulane wins. I guess Tulane wins by just outscoring them. And it becomes one of those classic kind of North Texas American games where it's, 35 with 5 minutes left in the game. And kind of who knows? I think it's going to be a good game. The line's only 2.5. So I don't think North Texas has a huge advantage here. But I believe in Mestemaker, Wyatt Young. And then the wild card or the X factor to me is Caleb Hawkins. Like that has been, wake me up the next time Eric Morris doesn't have a quarterback throwing for like 3,500 yards and 40 touchdowns. Like the thing that's different about this North Texas team is that the defense is good. Like we won't even call them elite or great, but they're good and they force turnovers and they can run the ball. Like Caleb Hawkins is freaking awesome. 21 rushing touchdowns. Just passed his assistant coach for single season rushing touchdowns in a year, over 1,000 yards. Going to be the first team all Texas running back, just to break that news in a week. He's been excellent, and he's provided a balance to this team to where they don't have to run 80 plays and allow the other team to run 80 plays. Like they can get out on top of you and then pound the rock on you, or vice versa. And they just didn't have that balance before. And Hawkins has been a revelation.
What do you think of Eric Morris going to Oklahoma State? I didn't really get your thoughts on that because that broke after we recorded last week's podcast.
Yeah. So from what I know, he could have had the Arkansas job as well. So it was probably Arkansas or Oklahoma State. And I totally get why you would choose Oklahoma State. Like you can win the Big 12 at Oklahoma State. You can't win the SEC at Arkansas. You just can't. Not if the chicken money is not coming your way. And from what I know, it's not, or they wouldn't have had to hire Silverfield. Really,
yeah,
they would have had
scraps.
They would have had a
bucket.
Like you realize very quickly what the pecking order in the SEC is this year with the coaching changes, right? Because like Summerall was going to go to Auburn and Golesh was going to go to Arkansas. And then Florida doesn't get Lane Kiffin. So Florida takes Auburn's top choice. Auburn takes Arkansas's top choice, and then Arkansas gets the leftover American Conference, like the musical chair on the outside, and Ryan Silverfield. But if I'm Morris, I totally get why I go take the Oklahoma State job. Not only do you have an easier route to the playoff, which, as we've talked about, is kind of what college football is about, like it or not these days. You're going to be able to compete closer in finances with the rest of the Big 12. Like Tech is kind of the outlier at this point, but Oklahoma State's closer to whoever number 2 is, probably BYU or TCU or whoever, than Arkansas is to like the 6th team. So you totally get that. And then Morris has spent his whole career here in this state. and you get to be in the same conference as 4 other Texas teams, which allows you to recruit that easier than if you're in a conference to where you only have 2 and you're going up against the 2 big boys in that state. So, and also Morris is an air raid guy. You walk into a place that's used to scoring a lot of points, like, having a beer drinking country boy that likes to score a bunch of points is kind of Oklahoma State's bag, right? And Morris gets to go do that and be himself. And so he's a West Texas guy. Stillwater is about as West Texas you can find outside of the state. So I think it's a cultural fit, a personality fit, a scheme fit, and it makes sense from a geography and a path to the college football playoff standpoint.
Let me throw a match on something you said, though. You say Oklahoma State has a better chance to make the college football playoff than Arkansas. And I agree on the surface, because Arkansas, they're not competing monetarily with the SEC teams. They're probably in the bottom 4th of SEC teams on the resources they're going to give to the football program. So that would say, okay, Oklahoma State can compete with everybody outside of Texas Tech. But if Texas Tech is going to do this every year, they do this every year. And BYU is going to be left out of the college football playoff for losing only to Texas Tech. Do they have a better, is the Big 12 head to just one team, Texas Tech, every year?
I guess maybe if Tech becomes like the Clemson of the Big 12, where they just suck all of the air out of it. I think BYU would have a better chance if they were scoring 40 points a game and they had a quarterback that threw for 3,800 yards and 40 touchdowns. Okay. I think there's a sexiness that a Morris team will have that a BYU probably doesn't, And when you have a quarterback whisperer who has gotten a walk-on in Baker Mayfield, a 2-star in Cam Ward to Incarnate Word, and now a non-quarterback playing quarterback in Drew Mestemaker, well, you can make up a couple $1 million in payroll deficiencies if your quarterback is that. And you can excel with not having to spend $3 million up front to get the 5-star quarterback. You can go bargain hunting because you can make me into an all conference quarterback. That's more money you can spend along the offensive line, along the defensive line, et cetera, et cetera. Like, he's proven he can make up those gaps. And that is what becomes valuable now. And it's why head coaches are the vogue instead of the coordinators. Like, if you've proven you can handle the budget and field a team within your constraints, well, what if I give you 3 times the money? What can you go do for me then? And I think that is what Morris is thinking, is like, if I go bridge the gap at Arkansas, it's to be 6th. It's to do what Vanderbilt is doing. And they're going to get left out at 10-2.
Yeah.
What I need to go do is bridge the gap with Texas Tech. And I think you can do that easier at Oklahoma State than you can bridge the gap with Georgia and Texas and Alabama and LSU in the SEC.
There's no way of knowing this, but do you think Drew Mestemaker's most lucrative transfer portal offer wouldn't be from Oklahoma State? Like, it'd be from another team, because Eric Morris knows that, hey, part of what makes Drew Mestemaker awesome is that he comes at a bargain. I could put that in the rest of the roster.
Yeah, and you would imagine he's got some sweat equity with it, right? Is like, you've already shown that you can put up these numbers. Like, you can be a Heisman, you can make millions of dollars in the NFL. To stick with me, kid. I can make you Cam Ward, I can make you Patrick Mahomes. Like, you should be able to get a little bit of a bargain there. But yeah, to your point, I have no doubts that there are going to be other teams that throw a bigger bag than what Oklahoma State can offer. It's just a matter of short-term versus long-term. I don't know Mestemaker's family situation and how much a couple $100,000 would change the decision. I do know where he went to high school, and it suggests that it probably wouldn't. And so, yeah, I would think some of the SEC, Big Ten, even like a Tech who needs a quarterback with Will Hammond being injured now, like Miami, he's going to get some tires kicked on him. It's just a matter of like who he wants to be around. Does he want to stay with the guy who kind of trusted him and found him out of nowhere, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's going to be interesting, because if Morris can kind of move the operation over, if he can bring in Cassidy with him, and he brings in Mestemaker and Hawkins and some of the offensive linemen, okay, whoever defensively that they think can kind of cut it in the Big 12, and then go use the rest of the budget to fill the roster, like, they can hit the ground running to win 7 or 8 games probably, and be a very fun, exciting team on the way to do it. If Mestemaker's not with them, I think that hurts
for sure.
right? Like I think some of it's, and I'd imagine if you're Oklahoma State, that's part of the questions. Like, how likely is it that Mestemaker's coming with you? Because like that would, that's a deal, that maybe not a deal breaker, but definitely a feather in your cap. So, I'd imagine those are all conversations that have all happened. And while you're preparing for a conference championship game, the good news is that while that may seem like a distraction, it is the reality of college football now. So like, it's also happening at Tulane. It's also happening at every other school. The agents for the players are already getting feelers and talked to by portal people. Coaches and assistants and coordinators are already jockeying for different jobs. Like, I hate to like remove the curtain or whatever, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I don't think North Texas is in any different situation than any team that they're going to be playing, but it does make for some variables of like how locked in is everybody, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's going to be a talking point if Tulane or North Texas lays an egg on Friday night. I guarantee you their fan base is going to blame it on their coach and on their players kind of having one foot out the door.
For sure. Yeah, I can just imagine Eric Morrison is meeting with Oklahoma State and they're like, all right, how likely is it that Drew Mestemaker comes with you? He's like, it's tough, but let me tell you what, guys, there's a senior at Shawnee, Oklahoma High School who actually is a backup tight end, but really good measurables. I've seen him throw. I think this guy's going to be a star.
Yeah.
I would still sign Eric Morrison.
Some option quarterback in West Texas that, hadn't been able to throw the ball more than 8 times or something like that. Yeah. I mean, and Morris, you trust when it comes to the only question I had about Morris in his head coaching arc was, could he run the ball? I mean, I remember you did a story on like him and his running the ball, like when he first took the job, because that was like North Texas' strength under Luttrell, and would he be able to kind of morph into more of a run play caller? Check. And like, could he get his coordinator hires right? Because that is the longer I do this, the more I think of like, you're only as good as your hires. And we could probably list some coaches who have gotten some hires wrong, and all of a sudden they went from like winning 10 or 11 games to winning 6 or winning 7 or whatever. But he got the first one wrong, and he nailed the second one. And that gives you, that's a guy who's getting better at this, who's maturing, who is figuring it out on the go. He's running the ball more and becoming more balanced that way to allow the defense to be better. He's going and hiring outside of maybe his like tree or whatever to go and get a defensive coordinator that comes in and giving them the autonomy to do it on that side of the ball. So I think it was a great hire for Oklahoma State. If I was grading the hires of the American coaches to places, I think Florida and Oklahoma State are the ones that got the guys that I think are big time coaches.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. All right, man, that's going to do it for this week in the preview. But like, any closing thoughts here, Craven?
10 of the 13 FBS teams are qualified for the bowl games or the postseason. The only ones that were under 6 wins were Rice, Sam Houston, and UTEP. We thought maybe Rice would get into a bowl because of the AQ at 5-7, but it seems like there's enough teams to fill all those bowls with 6 wins. And so I don't think, unless some teams turn it down, I don't think Rice is going to be bowling this year. So I think we will have 10 of the 13 playing in bowl games.
And nevertheless, a fantastic season for Rice to hit the over, which is what counts.
Yeah, hit the over.
Not what counts, but
I think that you could see the signs, right? You're like, oh, this is who we're trying to be. This is what we're doing. Once we start recruiting for it, it's gonna work. I think if you're a Rice fan, you feel good about where you are a year after the hire. Like, oh, I think we did this well.
All right, for senior writer Mike Craven, I am Carter Yates, and we will see you after the conference championship games for a little recap. Until then, catch you later.